As our energy horizons expand, so do our energy systems. Gone are the days when we would focus on one energy source at a time.
Today we're looking at innovative multi-energy solutions designed to multitask and make way for a low-carbon future. We're on the rooftop of the Low Carbon Energy Centre on the Greenwich Peninsula in London, which produces sustainable energy for over 15,000 homes, and all in a super efficient way. There's no better place to tackle today's topic, multi-energy systems.
Join us as we take a look at 3 multi-energy systems designed to integrate more renewables into our repertoire, all in a clean, efficient and flexible way.
Coming up, we see how indoor air pollution could fuel the future. We drive away from carbon emissions in a clean car. And we meet scientists riding the wave of the renewables boom.
And I travelled to Kenya to meet Benson Ureri, Africa Lead for Energy Access at the World Resources Institute, to get his perspective on the benefits and challenges of multi-energy solutions.
But first, some facts and figures.
It is predicted that 21% of global electricity production will come from variable renewables by 2040, up from 7% in 2018, supported by around $5.3 trillion of investment. Experts expect that approximately 39% of electricity production in the EU will be generated from variable renewables by 2040. Battery energy storage systems look set to play a pivotal role in the future of renewables. It is estimated that the market for them will more than double from $6.1 billion in 2018 to $13.1 billion by 2023.
Multi-energy solutions mean that almost anything can be thrown into the energy mix. In Finland, there's a startup using solar and wind-generated electricity, carbon sequestration and water to make a multitude of sustainable products.
Solitaire Power has developed a system that captures CO2 from the air and synthesizes it with hydrogen extracted from water to make hydrocarbons, or platform chemicals, that can later be refined for the production of clean fuel, gas and sustainable plastic products. Generated by renewable electricity such as solar and wind, hydrogen is produced using the electrolyzer module, which splits water, or H2O, into hydrogen and oxygen. Carbon dioxide is then collected from the air using a direct air capture module, and then the two are mixed in a mobile synthesis unit, where they combine to make multifunctional hydrocarbons, the basic building block of fuels.
Inside the direct air capture device are material called adsorbents. These adsorbents are similar to this material here. This basically has a molecule called an amine, and this amine is the, let's say, magic ingredient to capture the carbon from the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide molecule looks like this, and basically when you have CO2 in the air, if you push that air into our direct air capture device, this carbon is attracted to the nitrogen present in the amine in our sorbent. As the reaction happens, this CO2 breaks. A structure like this is formed in the resin. That is the adsorption phase. During the desorption phase, you just reverse the reaction and liberate back your carbon dioxide, ready for synthesis, ready for fuel production.
Mindful of the high levels of CO2 in indoor air, the company plans to use its technology to clean what we breathe in our offices by integrating its technology in buildings. It says that this will improve people's well-being and make them more productive, all while producing valuable clean resources with the CO2 pollution.
First, we have here city air. You always have a ventilation in the building, and you push it through the ventilation unit, through our carbon capturing unit, and then you are able to get lower CO2 air indoors, which will be the benefit of people's well-being. Then we have the electrolyzer. We break down water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then we have a synthesis unit which can do the fuel part, or hydrocarbons. And if this building would be connected to a gas grid, you could provide synthetic methane, which you can pump into gas grid. So the gas grid could be as an energy storage, or we could have a car filling station that you can fill up the car tank.
The main aim is to use the hydrocarbons to fuel vehicles where it can be mixed with fossil fuels, and any CO2 emissions released from the engine can then be pumped back into the Solitaire process, closing the circular loop. The product can also be refined to produce a cleaner gas to heat and power homes. Scientists often wish they could pluck solutions for a sustainable future out of thin air. The Solitaire team might just come close.
Benson Ireri is the Africa lead in energy access at the World Resources Institute in Nairobi. His work has focused on looking at ways to accelerate clean energy projects to support UN Sustainable Development Goals. Benson works with different partners to integrate renewable energy to development priorities. Benson, thank you so much for having us here in the beautiful city of Nairobi. Now, firstly, tell me, what makes a successful multi-energy solution?
I think for me, a successful multi-energy solution first is one that seeks to effectively integrate renewable energies into the system. That's number one. And then number two is one that definitely helps in terms of avoiding the curtailment of renewable energy, because for quite some time since the introduction of renewables or renewable energy solutions, there has been some significant level of curtailment of renewables. So if then we can have a system that helps to avoid the curtailment, I think for me that is one I would define as successful. And then number three is definitely one that helps in terms of increasing the shares of renewable energy, because definitely that's the whole essence of multi-energy solutions. And definitely, last but not least, I think for me, the other thing is one that helps in terms of promoting or ensuring the security of supplies of energy. And what I mean by security of supply is definitely, again, going back to the integration question. So it's looking at how can you be able to balance between renewable and non-renewables, for example, in terms of the integration.
Can you tell me about the WRI's strategy to improve energy access across Africa and all across the developing world?
So for us as a global think tank, one of the key things that we are looking at in terms of influencing energy access is to influence the allocation of resources or investment into energy access interventions, both in Africa and across the world. And so one of the key things that we usually do is do a lot of policy analysis and research that then can be able to inform the direction that policymakers are supposed to take, or even in terms of development financing institutions where they should be able to allocate resources. And then number two is we also engage very closely with development organizations working on the ground in different sectors of development and helping them to articulate their energy demands or their energy needs, and also trying to demonstrate how the integration of renewables can be able to help them improve their development outcomes. And then number three, of course, is we engage very closely with policymakers. And of course informed by the policy research that we do, so that we can be able to influence and we can be able to inform how they can be able then to different strategies that they can be able to take in terms of increasing or improving investment in the energy access sector. And finally is development of different platforms, like the one that we recently launched, the Energy Access Explorer, which helps to also demonstrate, for example, where there's a lot of demand for energy which is unmet, and what are different sources of supply that can be able to be harnessed, all meant to actually improve energy access.
Thank you so much for that, Benson. Stay with us, we've got a lot more to talk about.
After the break, we take to the wheel in a car that could steer the transport sector in a new direction. A key part of multi-energy solutions is clean fuel. And in Wales, there's a company taking the concept of zero emissions up a gear. Riversimple, based in the countryside of the preserved county of Powys, is on a mission to eliminate the environmental impact of personal transport. A number of automakers have developed hydrogen-powered vehicles already, but this company says its model has the lowest carbon emissions of any vehicle. In fact, the only emissions it produces is water. Plus, it's fuel efficient. It can travel up to 300 miles on 1.5 kilograms of hydrogen. That's the equivalent of nearly 250 miles per gallon.
It's a much more direct and engaging feel than a conventional modern car. It's got very rigid chassis and very good suspension geometry. I'm from a motorsport background. We weren't going to build a boring car, and so it really comes across as a different driver experience.
The car weighs around half as much as a conventional one, thanks to lightweight but strong composite materials. And weight is important. The lighter the vehicle, the less energy required to drive it. And given that many of Riversimple's team used to develop Formula One vehicles, speed, safety and stability all come into play as well.
Hydrogen-powered car is effectively an electric car, so you still have an electric motor, the car is still quiet, but instead of running off a battery, which stores the electricity chemically, it's running off a fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell. So you have a tank of hydrogen, it's compressed gas, and that provides hydrogen to this thing called a fuel cell, and combining with oxygen, it creates electricity and water as a byproduct.
While neither electric and hydrogen vehicles emit pollution, e-vehicles may have the edge when it comes to infrastructure. After all, charging points are popping up all over the place, while hydrogen refueling centres remain a rarity in most countries.
Refueling a hydrogen car requires much less behaviour change than battery electric cars. It's a very similar experience to filling a petrol car. You turn up at a filling station forecourt, and in fact we now have some filling stations where there is a hydrogen pump under the canopy, as they call it. And it takes 3 or 4 minutes and you drive away with a full tank of gas, which gives you the same sort of range as a petrol engine car would have.
In order to minimise waste and energy consumption on the vehicle production line, the company does not sell cars. Instead, customers pay a fixed monthly fee in return for a car, all maintenance, insurance and fuel.
Typically, if you sell a car, about 35% of the revenue generated by that car in its life goes to the manufacturer of that car, and that figure's declining. In our case, 100% of the revenue generated by the car in its life comes to us. And that allows us to amortise the car over a much longer period, and it means it's much cheaper for the customer per year than it ever could be if we were selling it to the customer.
The prospect of water emissions over carbon emissions is undoubtedly appealing.
By designing a car around the characteristics of hydrogen, rather than trying to shoehorn hydrogen fuel cells into cars that are designed for petrol engines, you can build a completely different sort of car. It takes all the stress off the technology, and hardwired into our model is a fundamentally cheaper, lighter and more efficient car than the way the industry is making cars.
One thing is for certain, Riversimple's innovation represents a definite gear shift for the transport and energy sector, and gives a glimmer of how we could eradicate the environmental impact of our personal transport. Time will tell, though, if the lights will go green for this innovation to take off on a major scale.
Benson, tell us, when it comes to improving air quality in Africa, what's the most helpful approach that governments and the private sector can take?
So there are a number of immediate interventions that can be done by the government and the private sector. And one of them is basically developing policies that can be able to promote the uptake of clean cooking solutions like LPG. And the second one, in my thinking, is coming up with alternative or less polluting firewood cooking stoves, because in Africa, I think most of the households still use firewood. And so looking at options for coming up with less polluting firewood stoves, I think would be quite helpful.
Could you tell us about WRI's Energy Access Explorer platform and how it reveals renewable energy as a way to close East Africa's electricity gap?
So the Energy Access Explorer is an online platform that leverages satellite imageries and locally available data to be able to visualize demand and supply. And the reason is for the longest time, energy planners have only been focusing on energy supply without necessarily giving attention to energy demand, which is a critical component. And so this tool helps to actually visualize where energy is most demanded and also where the supply is actually taken. And so for an energy planner, you can be able then to play with the tool to be able to see which is a place that needs urgent attention. And at the same time, also for development financing institutions, they can be able to use this tool to be able to see which are the communities, for example, that are underserved and what are some of the available renewable energy resources that they can be able to take advantage of.
How do you predict that improved access to clean multi-energy platforms could strengthen businesses and economies across East Africa?
I think one of the key areas is definitely reliable supply of energy, because any business requires reliable supply of energy for it to be able to function at optimum. And then, of course, the other thing is improved cost of doing business. Because as you all know, is unreliable electricity, for example, forces businesses to come up with backup in the form of generators, for example, which are quite expensive, then increasing the cost of doing business. And number 3 is unlocking new opportunities or new areas, especially in the rural parts, where currently we don't have, for example, energy, which then curtails the ability to do business there. And so providing access to clean energy in those areas would definitely open up new economic opportunities and hence new environments for businesses to be able to thrive.
Thank you so much for that, Benson. Stay with us. Now, I think you know everything there is to know about multi-energy solutions. Here's one common misconception.
You thought you knew? Think again. Myth. Multi-energy plants need to exist at the source. Otherwise, siting and transmission costs can be prohibitively expensive. Fact. Whilst finding suitable locations for multi-energy plants can be difficult, and negotiations, permits, and community relations can increase costs or delay projects, it has been proven possible to overcome these challenges. Firstly, let's define multi-energy systems. It's a site that coordinates the generation, transmission, and utilization of energy, especially renewable energy, across different energy sectors, pathways, and time horizons. A prime location is one which offers ample sun, wind, and land, all more commonly found outside of population centres. As a result, increased transmission infrastructure is necessary to connect supply and demand, which can affect system costs. After the break, we see how multi-energy solutions cope when renewables are at an all-time high. When it comes to clean energy, it may just be possible to have too much of a good thing. In Beijing, there's a scientific duo equipping multiple energy systems with ways to cope with record volumes of renewables. China is known as a leader in renewable energy and technological innovation. But this influx of clean energy comes hand in hand with challenges, such as large-scale curtailment due to lack of power system flexibility. One effective solution is integrating multi-energy systems, as Professor Chongqing Kang, Dean of the Department of Electrical Engineering at Tsinghua University, and Dr. Ning Xing have found out.
Fundamentally, the driving factor of multi-energy solution is that the technical characteristics of different energy systems are quite different. For example, electricity is easy to transmit and easy to use, but it needs to be real-time balanced. But the battery is still expensive. However, gas and heating system is significantly cheaper than storing electricity. So we can use it to indirectly store electricity so that we can accommodate more renewable energy.
Multiple energy systems increase the efficiency and flexibility of both energy supply and consumption, so they can be used when and where they're needed, and any excess energy is saved as opposed to curtailed and wasted.
Jilin province is a very cold province with 6 months of centralized heating. It is also very rich in wind power. The multi-energy solution there is to use electric boiler and heating storage to use the wind power that might have been curtailed at night to produce heat. For 1 square meter of heating space, it can utilize 160 kilowatt hour of wind power. That means 51 kilograms of coal. The overall project can save 8,000 tons of coal per year.
The team here have found that it's impossible to take a one-size-fits-all approach to multi-energy systems, as different regions of China have different resources and energy demands. And they all face their own unique challenges when attempting to fully accommodate renewable energy.
Southwestern China is rich for hydropower. One thing that we should know about hydropower is that it has strong seasonal pattern. That means in the flooded season, there are too much water to produce electricity that the load is not enough. Power-to-gas system can use the energy surplus to produce a lot of gas using the hydropower. The gas can be used in the transportation system or industrial system, or even to produce electricity in the dry season so that it can provide a seasonal storage to the power system.
The research of Dr. Zhang and Professor Kang make the multi-purpose uses of multi-energy systems clear.
According to the research of our 5-year projects, by 2030, more than 35% of the energy demand will be supplied by the renewables. The number will reach 60 to 70% by year 2050.
With such detailed research and fine-tuning, multi-energy systems could ease the high penetration of renewables, all while ensuring our energy systems are flexible and energy efficient.
Benson, in your experience, tell me, what role can multi-energy systems play in minimizing renewable energy curtailment?
There are two main roles for me I see for multi-energy systems. One of them, of course, is in terms of enhancing the flexibility of grid and power system supply, so that then the integration of renewables is much more easier and it's much more comfortable, unlike when it's not flexible. And then number two is in terms of increasing the efficiency for supply and demand, so that then the prediction of the balance between supply and demand is much more easier, and so you can be able to comfortably feed in renewables into the grid, and hence then managing to minimize the curtailment of renewable energy.
What can the immense growth of renewables in China teach the rest of the world?
In my opinion, one of the key things that the rest of the world can be able to learn from the case of China is on the importance of having very clear policies that can be able to send strong signals to the private sector and to the rest of the investors. And China, for example, you can be able to see they have a very clear policy on renewable energy targets. What that means is, for example, you can be able to tell what is the target for renewable energy into the national energy mix, so which then can be able to demonstrate to the private sector actors that China, for example, needs X amount of renewables into the national energy mix. And the last part, or the last policy issue we can be able to learn is on the part of financing. Again, finance for me is quite critical in terms of promoting renewable energy. And in the case of China, you can be able to see there's a very clear policy on attracting private sector investment into the renewable energy, but at the same time also in terms of the public sector financing on the renewable energy, which of course has also promoted a lot in terms of uptake of renewable energy.
Can you give me some statistics on the WRI's work to improve clean energy access across Africa?
The very important statistics I think we have to pay attention to. One of them is on the tracking report for SDG 7, which was done by SE for All in 2018. And the report indicated that, on the one hand, whereas the population of people without access to energy has drastically fallen from 1.2 billion to around 800 million, unfortunately, in sub-Saharan Africa, 600 million of those are actually found in the region. And so that definitely means that there's need to urgently focus on sub-Saharan Africa in terms of improving energy access. But then the other thing also to focus on is when everybody is talking about energy access, I think we are paying attention to the rural populations because we say those are the ones that are situated far off the grid. But the most important thing is that there's also a significant population of people in the urban settings who also have no access to electricity. So you'll find 100 million of the 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa, they're actually found in the cities, and they live under the national grid, but they have no access, so they're not connected to the national grid. So as we continue looking at promoting energy access, I think it's also important to look at how to connect the populations in the urban settings.
Thank you so much for that, Benson, and thank you for having us here in Nairobi, the green city in the sun.
Thank you very much.
So it looks like multi-energy solutions are truly multi-purpose. They help integrate more renewables into the system, clean up the transport sector, the air we breathe and how we power our homes, all the while enhancing energy efficiency and flexibility.
Next time, join us as we journey back over the highlights of all the developments we've covered in this series of sustainable energy. From smart grids to sustainable buildings and clean cooking, wherever innovation is rife, we've been there.
Join in the discussion. Send us your questions for our next energy expert. Tweet us at CNBC Energy using the hashtags AskSE and Sustainable Energy. Until next time, keep thinking green.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.